Hi, everyone. Welcome. We are live. I'm Jamie Chapman, and I have with me a very special guest today, Cachet Prescott. She is a fellow military spouse, and she is a DE&I expert. Cachet, I would love for you to introduce a little bit about yourself and your background. And the topic of discussion today, after her introduction, is going to be how diversity, equity, and inclusion should be a small business basic. And it's something that you should be thinking about from the beginning. So Cachet, let's hear a little bit about you and your background, and then we'll jump into the discussion.
Well, Jamie, thank you so much for having me. And as you mentioned, I am a milspouse. My husband used to be active duty, Air Force for 13 years, and now we're in the Air National Guard side of things. But we've been together 14 and a half years at this point in time, and we have 3 daughters. But aside from the family life, I am someone who really is passionate about having these conversations in the space of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and access, but particularly in the world of small business. Oftentimes when we think about this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, we think about the larger organizations. We think about the Dropboxes, the Googles, the JP Morgans, whatever the organization might be, the people that have the resources for this type of work, the people that have teams and people under their roofs that can really focus on these areas. But when we think about the small business owners, or the solopreneur or the micro business, we don't typically think about these particular conversations. And my goal is really to get them to think about how they can be intentional about inclusion in their businesses and how they can really elevate those conversations about equity in their own businesses, being proactive rather than reactive and waiting for something to happen before they take any action. So what I do is provide inclusive business and strategy planning for small business owners, on-demand strategy sessions focus on areas of, again, just making them be more intentional about it, thinking about it, and weaving it through every part of their business strategy and making it a core business strategy so that it's something that just kind of comes second nature rather than an afterthought.
And you called me out. I was so happy that you did, because I had put out a call for speakers on LinkedIn. I do this all the time. And I'm like, hey, I need people to speak on these live events like this. And I was putting what I was thinking of as a small business owner, the stuff I do every day, business basics, somebody that knows about money, somebody that knows about retirement planning, right? And then you dropped in the comments and say, how about DE&I? And I thought, oh, we've been focused on that so much lately, and I forgot to mention it. So I'm so glad you did that, and way to call me out. I deserved it. So also, let's talk specific to the military spouse business owner. On top of, being a business owner, which is hard, we're also a military spouse, which makes it twice as hard. So this seems like something that we would do naturally. It seems like something that, as a diverse community, the military community being so diverse, DE&I seems like something we kind of do inherently, but I bet it's not. Why don't you talk about the military community specifically and how DE&I is super relevant for a military spouse?
So I would agree with you. Generally speaking, you would think, okay, well, the military spouse community is one of those marginalized and often oppressed communities. So it's something they can absolutely identify with. And so that is true to some degree. And we do create opportunities for other fellow mil spouses and things of that nature. So there is an element of it in the work that other military spouses are doing, but that's not the only work to be done. And that's the one thing that I try to impress upon people, because the way, inequities show up, or some of these issues of diversity might show up, there's just so many different ways in which they could potentially show up. And it takes us being very aware of and intentional about paying attention to, okay, we may spend our time focusing on this specific group of people or this specific population, but is it at the detriment of other groups or other populations? And also, there are the conversations about what is called intersectionality. Just because, we focus on all military spouses, does that not mean that there are other military spouses that still have issues or still facing issues because of the intersection of their identities. So are there issues that, for instance, Black military spouse business owners are facing that white military spouse business owners may not be facing? And what are some of those issues that we need to address? So just giving people the space to think about these things, to use a more human-centered approach to the things that we're doing. So when I'm talking about inclusive business planning, I'm really talking about infusing it into, just creating the business plan in and of itself, or creating your business model, creating your customer experience, what that might be like, your strategic partnerships that you have with other business owners or military spouse business owners. What does that look like? And is there a thread of inclusion in terms of what that is? It could be, if you're a course creator or an infopreneur in some way, shape, or form, creating an inclusive learning experience and what that looks like, considering the different types of learners you have, their access to resources. So keeping this thread of inclusion going in every single thing that you're doing, and making sure you're asking the question along the way as you're doing these things and putting these initiatives together or projects together or creating these products or services, just keeping in mind, okay, do the people that I consider to be my ideal client or my target audience actually have the access to these resources? What might be some impediments to that access? What might be some impediments to them based on, it could be cognitive diversity, cultural diversity, simple conversations, things that you may say throughout the course of your marketing that may, for one group of people, may be seemingly innocuous, but for another group of people, it could be problematic. And so just getting people to really think about this as they're doing their day-to-day business operations.
And this is something, I feel I've always been inclusive as an individual, but then sometimes on accident, you end up surrounded by people that look like you. And I don't think we do it on purpose. I think it's something that's kind of built in, hardwired, if you will. But talk about, we have our own, built-in inherent biases, right? Sure. Talk about that. As a small business owner, how do we figure out and become aware of our inherent biases and then start doing things to be proactive, to be more inclusive in our small business?
Absolutely. So you are absolutely right. There are people that definitely have their own conscious biases that, they are well aware of, but there are a lot of unconscious bias. And the one that you just kind of alluded to is the affinity bias. We typically tend to be around people that look like us, think like us, act like us in some way, shape, or form. And in and of itself, that's not an issue. Of course, you want to be around people that are like-minded in nature and get you and understand you. But of course, as we are alluding to here, it can serve as a detriment in some ways because you don't get any diversity of thought. You don't get any difference in opinion. You get stuck in this echo chamber of people that are kind of saying the same things over and over again, maybe in slightly different ways, but it's kind of the same thought. So what I try to get people to do is really create spaces for diverse thinking, inviting people from places and spaces that are different from yours, even if they're not. So for instance, if we're talking about military spouse entrepreneurs, you can tap into people from other disciplines, other areas that may not have anything to do with the world of business, but they can give you insights about your product or your service or something you're thinking about doing that you just might not have considered. They can give you an objective perspective because they don't have a dog in the fight. They are just giving you something through a different lens that you had not considered. There is the idea of the wisdom of crowds. Oftentimes it's the people that are furthest away from this thing that, you're trying to do that can give you the most insight that you just had not considered. Because again, oftentimes we're so close to the solution that we can't really see a different way of doing it, or we're too married to our idea of what it should look like. But inviting those different voices and those different perspectives into the conversation can lead to something so much better than what we could have anticipated.
And you literally said echo chamber, which is among the military spouse chamber leadership team. We have been saying we need to get out of our own echo chamber. We need to bring people into the fold that are from different places that aren't maybe the military community specifically, because we've, had discussions about we want to put together a board of advisors, and we always see the same 3 people on everybody else's boards of advisors, right? And so we've had these conversations. It wasn't necessarily about ethnicity or whatever.
Sure.
It was about being in this little military bubble that we get super wrapped up in.
Absolutely.
And so we've had the same, conversation about how do we bring in other people from outside, because we're flying really close to the sun and we're probably literally missing things that are right under our nose.
Sure.
So I think as a military spouse business owner, a lot of us are solopreneurs. A lot of us may be working in the gig economy, self-employed freelancers. So I think of a larger company is going to bring on a board of advisors, whether it be formal or informal, to bring these diverse perspectives. But if you're a solopreneur or just a one-man show, what are your recommendations for surrounding yourself with these diverse perspectives that, because you're not going to have a formal board of advisors or directors.
Absolutely.
Jamie, the entrepreneur. So what do you recommend doing?
Community, community, community. So of course, what you all are doing, creating the space for mil spouses to come together and have these conversations. Again, we're like-minded in the fact that we are entrepreneurs, but we are entrepreneurs for so many different areas, spaces, places, experiences, and just joining forces and having conversations, having virtual coffee chats, picking each other's brains, or having sessions where it's like, hey, we're just going to jump on the Zoom call for the next 30 minutes to an hour and just, you talk about the thing that you have going on and I'll give you my perspective and then we'll flip that and then you can do the same for me. Just making time to just talk to people that are in that same place and space. Again, maybe different areas, but allowing them to hear you out and give you feedback, or if you join masterminds, or if you choose to, again, engage in just your military, your entrepreneurial community in other ways. There are so many different groups that are available to us. It's a matter of us making the time for it, being intentional about it, and creating space for relationship building. I don't use the word networking often because it usually has a negative connotation for people, but really and truly what it should be about is authentic relationship building. And once, we come together through, for instance, through the Military Spouse Chamber of Commerce, and we connect with other people and we get to know other business owners and their struggles and, build that sense of trust amongst each other, then we can have the conversations about, hey, I feel like I'm a little too close to this, I would love it if a few of us can just kind of get together quickly on a Zoom and just kind of, if you could give me your insights of what you think about this, and just start having conversations there. It's an informal board of advisors, but it is a way for you to really get outside of yourself and get out of your head and then be able to get to this clear, bold action because you have insights from other people that could just provide perspective you just hadn't considered.
Right. I had another thought while you were speaking, and it all about community. And a part of our community is those who we surround ourselves with in the form of mentorship. Right?
Absolutely.
And I had read a book. It's called 3 Points of Contact by Greg Cheek. He's actually somebody I know personally, and it's all about resiliency. It was kind of the punchline of the book. There was a little thing he put in that book about surrounding yourself with the 33.3% rule, 33.3% mentors, peers, and then subordinates, right? And so I'm thinking about how we structure that informally in our lives, just personally.
Absolutely. I love that idea.
Mm-hmm. So I'm starting to kind of think of the folks in my life who I've brought in as mentors, informally, the people I do mentor, and then my peers. And I realize there's a big opportunity just as an individual person and as a business owner to really toss that group of people up more. Sure. Because I stick with my industry a lot. I'm in the human capital space, right? And I tend to stick with folks in the human capital space. And I haven't even spoken with anybody in, say, tech as a mentor.
Exactly.
And that could totally be there could be groundbreaking things for me to discover there that I haven't even thought of. So
absolutely.
Yeah, we've got so much. This is a huge topic, by the way. There's no way, we're just barely scratching the surface of it. This could be a day-long workshop, I'm pretty sure. So, But Cachet, you're incredibly knowledgeable in this space, and you do this in a virtual environment, which is a pretty cool place to be working right now. Tell us, before we get ready to close out here, if you had a military spouse business owner right in front of you,
Sure.
what would be the top piece of advice that you would give this individual?
I think definitely just make sure you have a very clear idea as to what your goals are in terms of, it's great to say that we want to be inclusive. We want to, be open to all and all this good stuff and make people feel as if they belong. But I challenge you to at least come with one solid goal as to what that might look like in 2021 to actually make that happen. I'm not about just talking theory and talking about, how amazing it sounds. I really am. I'm going to challenge you. So my challenge to you all, no matter what it is, where you are in your business, if you haven't given it any thought, I want you to think about what's one thing in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, access that I would love to ideally try to focus on in 2021. And that could be any number of things. You may want to increase the diversity of your target audience. You may want to make sure that, when it comes to your client experience, that, the people that you're trying to reach out to do feel included. And if they don't feel included, what are some areas you can work on? There's any number of ways you can go, but at least starting to have that conversation about what that looks like. It could be looking at your website and seeing what that experience might be like. It's, you can jump into something like customer journey mapping and putting yourself in the shoes of the person that would experience your brand. And from the moment they encounter your brand, all the way through the moment that they hopefully become a raving advocate that is telling everybody about your product, what does that experience look like each step of the way? And are there some hiccups in the process that may affect their experience of inclusion? So
Awesome.
That is my challenge.
A couple people said hello. Donnell says hi. He says, tell Cachet I said hello.
Tell Donnell. Hello.
Well, I want to encourage you, if you're watching, whether it be now while we're live or later, first of all, do what Cachet said. Go in our comments and tell us that tangible thing, your tangible goal for 2021 with your business or your company or whatever work that you do professionally. Drop it in the comments and tell us.
Absolutely.
Put it out in the universe. That's how we're going to make it happen.
And that's exactly it, because then you have a community of people that can hold you accountable for that one thing. Again, just get started somewhere. That's why I say one thing. We'll build up to the other things, but we got to get started with one.
So drop the one thing in the comments and tell us what it is. Also, ask your questions. Tag us, myself, and or Cachet, and we will do our best to answer whatever questions that you have about DE&I. And thank you, Cachet, so much for your time and for your expertise. I would love to have you out again one of these days. We just barely touched any of this subject matter today, and I appreciate you coming on. So thank you very much for your time today, and everyone else, have a great day.
Thank you.